All right. So, welcome to today's episode of the Method Made podcast, where we discuss the challenges in technology transfer. Today, I'm joined by David, the CEO of Disco. And today, our conversation is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to be focused around the sort of connection point between scientists and real problem holders. So, David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nico. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So one thing I'd love to sort of start with today is sort of discussing the research translation gap. I would love to sort of hear the story of how you came across this problem, and yeah, we could take it from there.
Yeah. So a bit of backstory. Like I stumbled across tech transfer, and let's call it the science to market ecosystem by accident. I About 6 months ago, I decided that I wanted to found my own company. So the sort of exercise that I went through was, on one hand, reading a lot about the science problem statements of DARPA, NASA, NIH, kind of looking at humanity level science challenges that the world needs solving. And then on the other end, I went and looked for research for articles, publications of the scientists that I hoped would be able to solve the challenges that I found interesting. And eventually I got tired from doing this exercise repeatedly, because I'm not a scientist and I'm not even an engineer. I'm just looking for an opportunity to build a company around. So I kind of asked the CTO of the previous company that I worked for. I led the marketing, he led the R&D, and I kind of said, like, hey, let's build a database of all the scientists in the world and all their research, and let's connect it to a language model. And what that basically allowed us was to basically ask the model questions in industry jargon and have it sort of recommend science and scientists that are able to solve it. And we did this, like, for me, because I was looking for quantum sensors and scientists in sort of that sphere. But eventually, like, I came across some universities and some let's call it science heavy corporations, and they kind of said, look, we want to use this too, because we have industry challenges, and we don't know really how to go out there and find the science that can solve these challenges, because we're talking in industry and they're talking in science. So one is talking in lasers and the other is in photonics.
Hmm.
And sort of being able to bridge that gap is something that I think um, LLMs do really, really well. And it kind of, I think it's like that sort of language gap is a major barrier in our ecosystem, because I think that it's just very difficult for science heavy companies to communicate their challenges to the scientists, because, and to the scientists, it just can sound really, really boring, because it's not spoken to, like, it's not communicated to them in their language. So they're kind of, they phase out, they lose interest, and sort of it makes it very difficult to create those collaborations. So I think that's sort of how I came across, like, the language barrier and gap. So yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. So yeah, I've also sort of come across this. And in your eyes, is it? So I'd love to hear more about like what exactly, where does this problem like really come from? Is it the actual, like you mentioned, photonics and lasers? So is it really that like between industry and researchers, they use different terminology to discuss things? Like what is preventing these sort of the communication in sort of the status quo between the researchers and the problem holders, the companies right now?
So I think, like, if I would, I think the question that I would ask is, like, what's preventing us from taking science out of the lab and into the industry?
Yeah.
Right? And like there are all sorts of, like, different barriers that prevent it. That's sort of, I don't know if preventing is that may be a strong word, but it's sort of slowing that process down. So one of them, yeah, is language. But I think that the real problem is actually is the incentive, the sort of historically how this industry would work. So science, like a lot of the research that happens in our labs, is sort of science for the sake of science. Like we want to push the boundaries of humanity's knowledge. And in the process of that, like over time, we discovered that we come up with these amazing inventions that can turn into very lucrative and business opportunities. Um, so a lot of universities and research institutions have come up with sort of, okay, so let's commercialize this tech, right? Let's set up tech transfer organizations, and let's make sure that we capitalize on these science opportunities. But the problem is with that is that these are a lot of solutions looking for problems to solve. And any business man or woman knows that, any entrepreneur knows that, like, you start with the problem. And when you start, after you understand the problem and the pain points, then you go and try and figure out what the best solution is. So, it's very difficult to do the other way around, like to say, like, hey, I've built this amazing thing. Now let's go and think, like ideate what we're going to do with it. And I think that a lot of the reasons why that tech, like in many cases, the tech transfer, tech commercialization doesn't work, is because we're trying to sort of create these unorganic matches between these solutions that are looking for challenges. So I think what the industry needs, and I think this is what LLMs what it enables, is you start with a problem. Like industries these days, like they're very good at describing what are their biggest technical scientific challenges. And then when you go and look for a solution, you're not looking for an already developed IP. Maybe there is like a research or a patent out there that is super relevant to your challenge. But what we should be looking for is the scientist with the highest probability of solving that unmet need. That's what we should be looking for. And I think that until LLMs, that was really, really difficult to do because of the language gap, because it was so difficult for us regular humans to make sense of what's in the literature, in the scientific literature, right? Because like if I'm working for Lockheed Martin, like I'm thinking as an engineer, and my jargon and the way I communicate is as an engineer, right? I'm not always communicating as a scientist. So, and I think that's where LLMs are really good at bridging that gap.
So it sounds like the semantic search is like the sort of enabling breakthrough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. I think that's what's happening, because I think that until recently, what let's call it science discovery professionals would do, they would go on to they would Google Scholar or one of these sort of publication aggregators, and they would type in their keyword of choice, let's say quantum computing, and what they would get was sort of a list of scientists with who has the most volume of the term quantum computing in their science, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that the top scientists on that list are the best scientists to solve their unmet need, because their unmet need could be, how do I create alignment between qubits in all sorts of environments, right? And that's a very specific sort of sub-science of quantum computing. And what you want to be able to find is the scientists that are able to operate in that subdomain of science. And so I think that sort of it's very difficult to find the science that gives you the signal that you found the scientist that is able to solve this challenge.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can imagine from the scientist perspective, yeah, they're going to be looking at Google Scholar or some publication aggregator. And if you are at Lockheed Martin, you're going to put a job posting on LinkedIn or Glassdoor. And I can see that there's this gap where those job postings are not really going to be written in a way that that it's going to reach and engage with the scientist that actually needs it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's sort of, I've seen a lot of this sort of solutions in search of a problem. And what I think, in my opinion, part of the problem there is that scientists really love their domain area and they want to work specifically in that. But it's really difficult. There's a lot of risk in spending years developing a technology and then sort of hoping that the market is going to be at a place where it's immediately visible. Like, if you're an AI researcher right now, you won the jackpot, but there's not many places like that. So, I can really see the value there of bridging, basically allowing a way for scientists to engage outside of the lab.
Yeah. Look, I think that I just saw a post recently on LinkedIn about labs, like a major lab that is sort of out of funding because it lost some federal funding, and it's probably going to have to shut down, which is really sad. And sort of I made a comment that sort of created a debate there that I think that scientists, like, to be able to they need to be able to create labs that are sustainable, and the way to do that is to research, not science for only science for the sake of science, which is what I think traditionally what researchers would be doing until now. And I think that a lot of scientists need to start leveraging their labs and their capabilities to solve real world problems, or to research in the domains where they're eventually going to reach, be able to solve real world problems. And I think that scientists had sort of diversified their research. Like when I talked to a tech transfer guy in the UK, he said that like the industry stakeholders that come knocking on his door, they're either looking for something for right now, just kind of put out a fire, or they're looking for next, which is sort of what is the science going to look like in the next 5 years. Or this is sort of less the case, they're looking for new, which is stuff that no one understands. It's like kind of completely out there, and like that's sort of where scientists like to live, sort of at the sort of the
cutting edge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, at the edge of our knowledge. And I think that what scientists are going to need to start doing, because like we're living in this sort of this unstable funding climate, they're going to need to start diversifying their portfolio of research. And the reason why I think that they're going to need to start doing that is because funding is going to come from the industry. And the industry is going to be funding things that they care about, or either now, or stuff that they're going to see is probably relevant to them the next, let's call it 5 years time, right? And I think that's the way for scientists these days to create these sustainable sort of institutions, research institutions. So I hope that more scientists sort of go down that path, because I think that the way forward for science is through collaborating with the industry, because that I think is where funding is going to come from.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And something that sort of brings to mind is the difference in mindsets between that of a researcher and an engineer. I think like what you're describing is, I think that scientists sometimes need more of an engineering mindset. And in my eyes, one of those key differences is thinking within the constraints of a real problem, as opposed to just having complete freedom to explore in any direction, which in my opinion is sort of what scientists today mostly, enjoy and do.
Yeah. I also think that scientists, at least scientists I've been talking to recently, I think they have a lot more appreciation these days for engineers, and they sort of realize that for them to be able to explore the sort of the edge of knowledge, they need to have good engineers on their team. So like a scientist I was talking to about the quantum sensors, he was telling me that like the best research that he has is when he has also a physics scientist, also an electrical engineer, and also a software engineer that sort of manages their algorithmic sort of domain. And he said that only when I have these three components, stakeholders together, sitting in a room and collaborating, that's where I'm able to really sort of find the edge of the science that we're looking at. And I think it just goes to show that like even scientists are sort of more open these days to, okay, like how do I start thinking about this like a product manager would in a startup. Like how do I manage this as a product? So yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And what I see in sort of technology development and commercialization is that a lot of almost all real technologies that are in people's hands today are interdisciplinary in nature. They're not the product of pure biology, chemistry, or physics. They are, yeah, they're
Yeah.
intersections like that.
Yeah. Cross disciplines. Yeah, 100%. I'll give you a really cool example of something that happened to us. So one of our users was looking at and they were looking for scientists to solve an unmet need in sort of the realm of brain surgery. And they got a short list of scientists that like all had great medical backgrounds and like had conducted science like in sort of the brain surgery sphere. But one of the scientists was had nothing to do in medical, nothing to do in brain surgery. They were actually from a chemistry slash materials background. So our user called like our angry customer calls us up and said like, okay, your system isn't working. And but when we took a deep dive and when we looked at that scientist, what we saw was that that scientist was using a technology that could be applied to brain surgery, but that specific scientist never did that, right? So they're like, if you would search for brain surgery, like in their publications and in their research, you wouldn't have found that term. But like, and I think that's the unlock of LLMs, that they're able to sort of make those connections, those reasonings cross disciplines, and find new scientific opportunities. And I think that what makes this time really, really exciting, because suddenly we don't need to look for solutions only under the lamp, if that makes sense. Like we can sort of expand our boundaries of what we were used to until now.
Wow, that is a very cool story. Because that's really sort of demonstrates the function of the semantic search, and even like in a sort of broader sense in bringing together solutions that you wouldn't on a surface level don't appear to be related, but
Exactly.
later are. Wow,
Yeah.
that is
Exactly.
that is really interesting. I wonder if you have if any stories that have come up in sort of biotechnology and sort of the pharmaceutical or biotech, that sort of space that are of interest to you.
I don't know if stories, but I will say that I feel that sort of the biotech slash pharma space are the most advanced I've seen in how they look at science discovery, because I think in sort of these domains it's really, really important for them to stay at the forefront of their industry. So they put a lot of effort into that, as opposed to, I don't know if I make I hope this isn't an unfair comparison, but I was speaking to a corporation in sort of the mineral space, sort of kind of mineral slash mining, and like they weren't as savvy about science discovery. Like there was a lot of sort of understanding how that ecosystem worked. And like when you look at biotech and pharma, like they're just ahead of the game. Like it's even like they wrote the playbook. Like that's how it feels. So
Okay, so biotech and pharma, they're sort of like of the industries that are leveraging science, they're sort of at the forefront.
yeah, that's what I've seen 100%. Yeah.
And do you see, I'm curious if you see sort of more advanced partnerships in biotech between research institutions and like, biotech companies, pharma. Do you see, I'm curious if there's sort of, if the people that have the better relationships like that between the research institutions and the commercialization, the companies, if that's sort of affecting their ability to take advantage of these new technologies.
I think that because they're really good, they because they understand the sort of the manual of how this science to market ecosystem works, I think it's also very interesting for them to leverage it to other needs, and I'll give you an example. So, like sometimes, like what I've seen a pharma company do is like say, okay, like we're interested in this research, but we're also going to buy the researcher out and make him like and get him to come work for us. And that is something that I haven't yet seen in defense, for example, like in aerospace. I haven't seen that happen yet. And in pharma, definitely. Like that's like for example, like in defense, a lot of times they look for the best, most accomplished researchers in their domain. And what I've seen the pharma companies looking for is the rising stars. So what they're looking for is something completely different. Like they don't want a high H index. Like that's like a signal of someone like that's been too long in the lab. What they want is that PhD or postdoc that have like a few sort of publications to their name, but are super relevant to the future of a specific science. And they're just gonna sort of gobble them up and sort of bring them into their organization. So the profile of science and scientists that these organizations are looking for is very, very different. And like that's a use case that we needed to learn and figure out, because we were under the assumption that you're just looking for the best and the best, like those that have the most credentials and like that are sort of have the most impressive background, and apparently not. So we learned something new.
Huh. So in biotech, they're really open and interested in investing in potential, not just sort of already what you've accomplished.
100%, 100%. That's what we're seeing.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is super interesting. Well, yeah, I've really appreciated the conversation about sort of technology transfer, and it's been very insightful to sort of learn about the nuances and differences across disciplines, especially. So, yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining us today.
Appreciate it. I think there's a lot of opportunities right now in the science to market ecosystem, and the more stakeholders that participate, the more we're all gonna get value out of it. So, thanks for having me. Appreciate you, Nico.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's a wrap for today's episode.